let's be honest, a couple of days ago, most of us didn't know very much at all about the Cardinal of Buenos Aires. We do now, though. He's become Pope Francis. He's leading the Catholic Church, and lots of you want to talk about him. We'll be live with guests in Delhi, Washington, D.C. and Paris. Wherever you're watching, we're live, so you're welcome to take part as we look forward to the future of Catholicism, but also some of you want to talk about the new man in charge's past. This is our phone number. We're on Twitter, Facebook and Google+, as you'd expect. We are live here on BBC World News. Do get involved.
I experienced.
This is chaos.
People are going to want to know.
Let's just say something.
Now, lots of you like to have your phones or your tablets or your laptops at hand when you're watching World Have You Say to take part that way. All of your messages, whether it's through Google+, Facebook or Twitter, they all come straight to me. So I'll do my very best to work them into the conversation as we go along. Let me introduce you to our first few guests. Live from Delhi, we have Father Dominic Emmanuel, a spokesperson for the Archdiocese of the city. In Washington, D.C., we're joined by William Newton, a practicing barrister and a Catholic blogger. And live in Paris is Beatrice Stevenson, who's a student there. All three of you, you're very welcome. Well, Father Dominic, let me start with you. Are you excited about the prospect of Pope Francis leading your church?
I am indeed very excited and really very happy that the Pope has been elected and that he comes from Argentina, a break after 1,300 years from a European or Eurocentric church, and therefore shifting to the third world or developing world to begin with. Then he's a religious, as I am a religious, though I'm not a Jesuit, but I am a religious priest as he is. And he has chosen to name himself as Francis. And of course, we have some very famous Francises in the church, and I understand that he wants to follow the simplicity and the poverty of Saint Francis of Assisi, who is incidentally an Italian saint, and who was told, or as he heard, Jesus asking him to rebuild his church. And I suppose when Pope Francis was taking that name, I suppose it was in his mind that he has this huge task in front of him to rebuild the church.
William, let's bring you in. You don't have any reservations? After all, we're already seeing the Vatican having to answer questions about Pope Francis's past.
Well, and the questions that they're answering about the past...
Go ahead, William.
No, I'm sorry. I was going to say the questions that they are asking right now or responding to are questions that he responded to when he was Archbishop of Buenos Aires as well, and they were investigated and nothing was really made of them. So I think this is just natural when somebody rockets to the world stage in this way that people don't really know very well outside of Argentina, who's a very quiet man, who's a very gentle man, who does not have a huge compendium of written, published work that we can refer to as we did with his predecessor, Pope Benedict. So I would agree with what Father said, that this is a very exciting time for the Church to see we're having a Pope come from the developing world, someone who has spent his whole life dedicating himself to evangelizing through ministering to the poor, which is one aspect of being a Christian, and that's very exciting.
Well, I'm interested that you use that word evangelizing, because those of you watching around the world, you may have already heard that Pope Francis says that he wants that to become a priority within the Catholic Church. Don't just nurture your faith within the Church, go out beyond it to bring more people inside of Catholicism. Is that something you want the Catholic Church to do? Let us know. We're on the WHYS hashtag. You can get us at facebook.com/World Have Your Say. I mean, Father Dominic in Delhi, wouldn't it be better for the Pope to concentrate on getting the Church in order, dealing with the scandals of its past before he worries about expanding it?
The scandal is just one small part of what has happened to the Church. Church is involved in so many activities. Let us understand that Church is a global church. It is not just in Europe and in America. It is all over the world in every single country. And there are different activities that the Church is involved in. And therefore, the Pope has to, of course, worry about the scandals. He has to worry about the other problems. But he has to worry about many other things. He has to worry about administration. He has to worry about how to inspire priests and nuns, how to inspire Catholics, how to deepen their faith, and how to make them follow Jesus Christ more closely.
Thank you very much, sir, for that point. Now, as you'll hear me mention every week on World Have You Say, we've got a video uploader, which means that through your phone or your PC or your laptop or your tablet, you can send us short videos which we can work into our discussions. You can upload it through worldhaveyousay.com. It's incredibly easy to do. I'm going to play you several that we've received during the course of the show. Let me first of all show you this one. It's from Teresa in the Philippines.
All of them focus on the problems of the world and what Pope Francis will do to solve them, but not what he will be as a leader of the Church. I believe that, like Benedict XVI, Pope Francis will be a faithful follower of Christ, putting God above everything else in life.
Well, thank you very much to Teresa for sending that. She's putting emphasis on continuation with the work of Pope Benedict. But hold on, William. I thought one of the things that a lot of Catholics were saying was that perhaps they needed a younger man to lead the Church because of concerns that we've had about Pope Benedict's health. They don't seem to have taken note of that point of view.
Well, we don't know what they actually discussed, obviously, but I will say that there have been many times when the outside world or even individuals within the Church have said that they want a particular pontiff, and we end up with someone else. And I think the classic example of that is John the 23rd, who started the Second Vatican Council. Nobody expected someone that elderly to actually do very much of anything. They didn't think he was going to be around long enough to finish it, and yet look what he ended up doing. Same thing with John Paul II. Here's a very, charismatic person from Eastern Europe. Not a lot of people know, and he ends up being a rock star going all over the world and attracting millions of people to come out and see him. Same thing with Benedict. Everyone said, oh, he's the Panzer Cardinal, and he's going to come in and smash all sorts of dissent within the Church. And what does he end up doing but building bridges to a lot of other Christian denominations? So I think it's a bit early, given that we're only 3 days into his pontificate, to know what somebody this age is actually going to be able to do with however long he's going to be in office.
I like the idea of Pope Francis becoming a rock star. I'm interested to see how that's going to manifest itself. Now, we can bring Beatrice in. She's live with us from Paris. She's a student there. Beatrice, do you have any concerns about Pope Francis's age?
No, not particularly. I think I quite agree with what was said. I think we'd have to see what he can do and what he has to say. And I think he's not that old to tackle some important issues within the Church.
So what are those important issues? What's the most important one for you?
I think what we've been seeing in the press is that he's someone very humble and very concerned by the poor. And I think that would be great for the Church to kind of focus on all these questions of poverty within the world, and the fact that also he's from South America. I think that's something great.
Of course, what she's saying is wonderful, and the Pope has really a lot of work cut out for him and before him. And one thing I would like to mention here, that night, that evening, it was night here in India, when the smoke was billowing, the white smoke was billowing, and as people gathered in the square, I was pleasantly surprised to see the number of young people gathered in the square. I mean, normally people say that young people are disenchanted with the Church, they are leaving the Church, they don't find Church interesting, but it is there at the square. In everyone's eyesight, everybody could see that there were so many young people. So one of the things I feel that this Pope is already quite appealing even to the youth. I mean, at that moment, nobody knew who was going to be elected and who was going to come out in the balcony. And yet we had thousands and thousands of young people very excited.
And Father Dominic, I want to ask William about... Let me just jump in there, because I want to ask William why you think that's happening, because some people might think that it's odd that 1 in 6 people still follow such an ancient faith. They might have thought that the advance of human knowledge or skepticism about a belief in a God may have waned, and yet it appears to be in relatively rude health.
Yes, and I think one of the reasons is that the message that is oftentimes offered by modernity is simply one of materialism with no meaning other than whatever you can get for yourself in this life. And Christianity has always promised that there is a point to living, to suffering, to serving others that will eventually better you and get you to what we believe in with respect to the afterlife. But I would like to go back to something that Father just mentioned, which is it's not only interesting to see how many young people were there and very excited, as they were for, as we all saw on World Youth Day in Madrid with Pope Benedict, as I'm sure will now happen with World Youth Day in Rio, but it's also the use of technology, which is fascinating. And if you saw the number of iPads and iPhones and things that were being held up in these crowd shots that we've all seen on the BBC and elsewhere, of people using technology to share with their friends, that's part of the new evangelization that both John Paul II and Benedict XVI have really stressed, that the Church needs to go meet the people where they are. And I think that what we're going to see with this particular Pope is not only reaching out to some people who may not have, for example, access to that kind of technology because of poverty, but also having the chance to witness to other people and say, we have the ability to reach far more people now than we ever could before by simply going door to door. And while those things are important, we can use things like social media, like the different kinds of media that are offered online, to be able to reach out to people and say, have you ever really considered the Catholic Church? Have you ever really thought about what you know?
But I suppose the point here, William, is whether people want you to reach out to them. And we can ask our viewers that, because we've got 3 different Catholics live with us. We'll have many more before the end of the show as well. Beatrice is in Paris, William is in Washington, D.C., and Father Dominic is in Delhi. If you've got points for them, or indeed for any of our guests, you're always welcome to send us emails, what have you say, at bbc.com, or get us on all the different social media that we use. Let's quickly pull up a message from Alex in the UK, posting on facebook.com/world have your say. He's 76, so probably too old again, shown in his more of the same stance on gay marriage and adoption. However, his empathy for single mothers is refreshing. Beatrice, let me get you to respond to that. Isn't he offering us exactly the same thing as Pope Benedict on the most important issues?
Well, I think it's quite reassuring to know that he's offering the same things. I like that continuity in the Church. I wouldn't want someone who would contradict the last Pope, but I do think that he might bring some renewal in the style, and maybe on some ideas that would maybe refresh some things, but on the dogmatic things, on the faith and on the teaching, it's quite reassuring for me to know that he's bringing the same things.
Well, that's interesting, isn't it? What about you, Father Dominic? Are you reassured that you will get continuity, or do you want a little more promise of change?
No, we want both, but let us be clear that there are certain fundamental things which do not change. The sun always shines, doesn't it? Then the clouds always bring rain, for instance, and the trees always blow wind. So there are some fundamental things of nature, and there is some natural law which don't change. It is only other things, the externals, that change, and certainly, for instance, the first Pope from South America, that's a change. And why not? So the Church welcomes it. People have welcomed it. They have all said very nice things about the Pope. So those things are changing, but the fundamentals with regard to, let's say, abortion, which is basically respect to life. I mean, I was the other day on another channel and telling them, please don't call abortion just abortion. It is murder. And that has to be clearly articulated to the rest of the world. Rather than diluting it, we have to articulate it more clearly and firmly as to what it means, so that the message reaches the people.
But this is the Father Dominic, this is the point that's being discussed inside and outside of the Catholic Church. And William, you can comment on this. What are the non-negotiables? Does that include the rule of celibacy? Does that include gay marriage? Does that include the current stance on abortion? Are these completely off the table as far as you as a Catholic is concerned?
Well, you're talking about 3 very different things that don't really have anything to do with one another. I mean, and to say that you know, these things are the most important issues facing the Church today is not true. I mean,
I didn't say they're the most important. I just said that these are well-known beliefs held at the moment by the Catholic Church. Father Dominic is suggesting some things just can never change. I'm asking if those 3 fall into that category.
Well, in fact, you did say earlier that they were the most important issues, but what I would say is that with respect to priestly celibacy, that was a decision that was reached in the Middle Ages simply because of some problems that they were having. But with respect to issues such as marriage and abortion, you're asking the Catholic Church to essentially become something which is not the Catholic Church. These are issues that have been decided since the time of Christ and the Apostles and their immediate descendants. And if we look to not only the Gospels and the writings of St. Paul, but also the Didache and the early Church Fathers, these were issues that were discussed by the early Church, and they were decided almost 2,000 years ago. So to assume that these things are simply going to change because some people don't particularly care for them, I think is taking a very short-sighted view of the entire two millennia that we have of church teaching on these issues.
Well, you're echoing what Father Dominic said. I can see Beatrice nodding her head as well. So the three of you are in agreement. Those of you watching, are you persuaded by the case that William makes that certain things are non-negotiable? Otherwise, you're asking the Catholic Church to become something other than the Catholic Church. Well, lots of you are getting in touch. I can see calls coming in here from Algeria, Nigeria, Somalia, Gambia and South Africa. Thanks to all of you who have been calling and messaging us. Francis in Finland says he will be a great pope. In just a short time, he's transformed the image of the papacy. We'll get into that idea in a couple of minutes here on BBC World News.
No, I actually talking about it.
Let me say something.
Talking about it.
Let me say something.
Hello, I'm Paddy O'Connell from Weekend World. This week we'll be uncovering the historical roots of the bitter conflict in modern Syria. We'll find out whether Americans are addicted to guns, and we'll explore one of the world's greatest and largest artworks, the Moscow Metro. Weekend World, a journey from culture to crisis.
Here in Zimbabwe, people are preparing to vote in a constitutional referendum, seen as a milestone ahead of key elections later this year. But will a new constitution help nudge this country back towards stability and democracy? We'll have full coverage here on BBC World News.
Next on Hard Talk, my guest is one of the big beasts of Britain's Conservative Party, veteran Cabinet Minister Ken Clarke. When it comes to key challenges from the economy to Europe to modernising the Tory party, is Prime Minister David Cameron in danger of losing his grip?
No, I actually talking about it.
Let me say something.
Hi, I'm Ros Atkins. Welcome back to World Have Your Say. You wouldn't have got any prizes for guessing our subject this week. We are, of course, talking about Pope Francis and what he may or may not be able to bring to the Catholic Church, how much change he should promise and how much continuity he should deliver. We've been talking to William in Washington, D.C., Beatrice in Paris. We'll come back to both of them in a moment. Still with us is Father Dominic in Delhi, but I've got two more guests to introduce you to. Live from Nairobi is Sefu Sani, who's a second-year university student, and live from the camera of BBC Mundo in Buenos Aires, we have Florencia, who works in communications. Florencia, tell me your emotions when you heard that Pope Francis would be taking the leadership of the Church.
Hello, thank you. Well, really, it was very, very touching for us Catholics in Buenos Aires to hear the name of our bishop. We had been praying for all the cardinals for them to choose the Pope that was the best for the Church and for the world, but we really never imagined that it would be our bishop. We are very, very happy. And we know him, and we have been participating in his masses and hearing his teachings, and we feel he's very near us. The same way you saw him on television on the balcony the first time he came to the world, he was shown to the world.
And Florencia, let me ask you, because we've already heard the Vatican today defending how Pope Francis behaved during the military junta in Argentina. Do you have any concerns about what he did or didn't do in the past?
No, I'm not really concerned about that. I believe and I've heard that he has always been near people who suffer, always been near poor people who are single mothers, as you said before in the show. He was very concerned about women that are alone and that have to deal with a pregnancy on their own without help. And he was always in the street always hearing people's problems, and that's very amazing, really, that you go out on the street and you hear people from Buenos Aires really happy to see their bishop as the Pope because they like him. They like him very much.
I can tell by the look in your face how excited you are. I mean, Sefu, let me bring you in. Do you have any concerns about the past of Pope Francis? Does that feel important to you?
No, the past of Pope Francis is not important to me because as human beings, we are dynamic people and we keep changing. We learn from the past, we learn from our mistakes, we learn from our experiences, and we become better people with time. So in my opinion, his past is not really to be measured in what he is today, because I believe what he is today as a pope is very different from what he was as a bishop. He's going to step it up because he's been there as a bishop and he's moved a rank higher. So he's more mature, he knows more than what he did when he was younger or when he was less experienced. So really, I don't think that someone's past should be accounted in some things. Like in this case, I don't think it's important.
And all three of you, let me ask you, because Father Dominic, you're in India, Sefu, you're in Kenya, Florencia, you're in Argentina, all countries within the developing world. Is it significant that the Pope comes from the developing world, or do you think that he merely represents Argentina rather than a broader collection of countries? Perhaps, Father Dominic, you could go first, but the two others, feel free to join in.
No, actually, you see, the church is a global church. We have to first of all admit that church is a global church. It belongs to everybody all around the world. And so everyone is connected, regardless of whether they belong to North America or North Europe or South America or Africa or India. We are all one universal church, and we are all one big family. But particularly because he comes from Argentina, we have a hope, and particularly having heard that he has special love for the poor and his emphasis on social justice and social issues. And that, of course, makes us very happy in India, because in India we have a lot of social injustices as in other countries as well. And therefore, it will give a boost to those fathers and sisters, priests and nuns and missionaries who are working for the oppressed, for human rights violations. They must get a boost knowing that their Pope was always for social justice, worked for the poor, lived a poor life, lived a simple life, and that should inspire us all the more.
Sefu?
I am of the opinion that it is important that the Pope came from a developing country as such. I was actually hoping that the Pope would come from Africa, because it's been many years, about 1,000, since we had a Pope who was from Africa. Not that I'm being racist or anything, but I just think that when a person comes from a less developed country, it's very easy for them to look into the issues affecting these people, because when you're on a lower rank, it's easier for you to understand the people in the lower rank, and if you move higher, you'll be able to understand the high places as well.
That's an interesting...
But when you're somewhere high, it is very hard for you to come down. That is just my opinion.
I'm interested to ask our viewers whether you agree with that, whether to come from the developing world puts you in a better position to understand what the poorest people in the world are going through. By all means, get us on the phone. You can text us. We're on social media as well. I can see that Francis in Belarus has just called us up to say he's too old to lead the church. We need someone younger. Well, we talked about that issue earlier. Hasib from Pakistan calls this a bold revolutionary choice. And I'm interested to explore that idea. More comments coming in from Sri Lanka, Kenya, Cambodia, China and Zimbabwe. I'll do my best to work as many of your points in as possible. And of course, some of you are raising the child sex abuse scandals that have dogged the Catholic Church in recent years. And Linda in Ghana used our video uploader to address that. Let's have a little look at what she's had to say.
It would be good for the Pope to address these issues, the scandals that the Church is facing, because I believe a lot of people are losing their faith as Catholics or Christians because of the ongoing challenges in the Church. So I think with the immediate resolutions facing the Church in terms of leadership, people will come back to the Church again.
Well, Linda, thank you very much for that. Father Dominic, Sefu and Florencia, just have a think about what you would like Pope Francis to do about the child sex abuse scandals. How should he deal that big issue? We're going to take a quick break here on World Have Your Say, but I'll come back to all three of you. And of course, those of you watching, I'm interested to hear your views on that issue as well. Speak to you in a moment.
Let me say something.
Hi to all of you watching on BBC World News. Welcome back to World Have Your Say. Of course, we're talking about Pope Francis and what he may be able to bring to the Catholic Church. And of course, the challenges facing him. So many of you are getting involved. We really appreciate all the messages that you're sending in. Latest calls have come in from Uganda, Canada, Norway and Finland. I'll do my best to work those messages into our discussions. Remember, we're looking at the key challenges. There's a long list of things he could get on with. What do you think should be his priority? And what do you think of him as a man and of his past? Because that is also a big issue. Remember, one of the main news lines today is that the Vatican spokesman, Federico Lombardi, has said there has never been a credible, concrete accusation against him, and that concerns what he did and didn't do during the military junta in Argentina back in the late 70s and early 80s. Lots to talk about. As you can see, we've got three guests live with us from America, Kenya and Italy. We'll be with all three of them in just a moment.
I experience.
People are going to want to know. Let me say something.
Okay, let's introduce you to our next three guests. Sefu's still with us in Nairobi, but two new guests are joining us. Kira is a teacher from Ireland who's live with us from the thick of things, as we can see, right in Vatican City. And we're also joined by Stephanie, who's a teacher and blogger in Pennsylvania in the States. Stephanie, let me start with you. How do you think Pope Francis should now approach the issue of the child sex abuse scandals? Lots of our viewers want him to do something extra to what Pope Benedict did. How do you think he should approach this very difficult subject?
Yeah, I definitely agree that it is a difficult subject. You know, anytime this happens in any institution, it's definitely a tragedy. And I think that's the approach that he should continue to be taking, and just this recognition that that Christ on the cross, right, he feels this pain, and that he, and we as the church are suffering in union with these people as well. That as the body of Christ, all of the members are suffering together in this, and that those who are hurt are not alone in this suffering, and that there are people there to support them in that.
And Kira, there is a perception, isn't there, at least from some people, that the church responds to these crises about abuse rather than takes a proactive stance on them. Do you think that Pope Francis needs to change the tone?
Yes, absolutely. I think he needs to deal with the past, and he needs to be ready for any more abuse cases that come up. I think that they need to organise and have child safety has to be an absolute priority, and it has to be the #1 priority within the church and within the church groups to reassure people and let them know that they are dealing with these problems and he will face them head on.
And I'm sure Stephanie and Sefu would like to hear from you. What's it like there? How's it been?
Oh, it's been wonderful, absolutely electric. We were here on the first day when the black smoke came. It was lashing rain, but even when the black smoke came, everyone cheered. It's been a great atmosphere. On Wednesday, it was incredible. There was music, people were cheering, dancing, and I think he presented himself very well, the new Pope. I think he really presented himself well. Buonasera, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, polite. He came across very well.
Sefu in Nairobi, have you got anything you'd like to ask Kira?
Yeah, I'd like to ask her what she felt at first when she saw the white smoke and when the Pope came out and started to address them.
Well, when we saw the white smoke, I felt ecstatic. Oh, who is the new Pope? I was excited to see who he was. There were so many great people to choose from, and I think that the Cardinals they deliberated and they chose the best person for the job at this time. So when he came out, it was wonderful to feel that this man will lead us, and I'm just looking forward to the future.
I can see the excitement in your eyes, Kira. Stephanie, you're smiling too. Is there anything you'd like to ask Kira? She's right there in St. Peter's Square.
Oh, I'm very jealous. I studied abroad in Rome because I studied theology, and I wish that I was studying abroad this semester rather than like 3 years ago. But I guess what was the feeling like in between when you saw the white smoke and, you know, we're all watching the video waiting for someone to come out on the balcony, but what was happening in the square at that time?
Oh, everyone was singing, chanting, cheering, and I was rooting for Sean O'Malley. So will it be him, won't it? But we were delighted, and I think it's like when he came out and we knew he was from the Americas, everyone was so excited, and I think it means that, you know, it'll bring the Catholic community together and closer together, and we were just, everyone was cheering. It was wonderful.
Kira, thanks for answering those questions. Stephanie, we appreciate you joining us from Pennsylvania. Thank you very much for your time. I can see more calls and comments coming in from Libya, Pakistan, Japan, Chad and Norway. World Have You Say is certainly living up to its name at the moment. Puffres in Italy tweets, I don't think a lot will change. It will just reinforce Catholic values. I mean, that's interesting because some people are suggesting this choice is revolutionary. Jay in Sri Lanka has called up to say, I hope he turns out to be an anti-capitalist. Well, Pope Benedict had some quite fierce criticism of the way that capitalism was working in the Western world. One other one here from Akram in Sudan. He's tweeting saying, I hope the elected Pope will reach out to the Muslim world. And that was something I was talking about with colleagues in BBC Arabic. They were saying a lot of their viewers are quite sceptical about the Catholic Church. They were very offended by one speech in particular that Pope Benedict gave several years ago, and they're hoping that the tone will be right from Pope Francis. Thank you very much indeed for those comments. Let me go back to Sefu in Nairobi, because Sefu, I think our viewers would be interested to hear you talk about where Catholicism fits into modern Kenya. Does it still have an important role, or is evangelical Christianity becoming more and more popular?
I think Catholicism has an important role in modern Kenya, simply because Catholicism, it unites people from all races, from all tribes in the country. I mean, Catholicism is universal. It does not only unite Kenyans, but the world at large. Talking about the evangelism, it is becoming popular in a way, and that is one of the issues that I would love as a modern Kenyan, a modern African lady, for the Pope to look into. Since he is from the Jesuit order, and mainly their work is evangelization, you know, passing the word to the people and talking to them. That is what the Jesuit order is all about, really. And I think the Pope should really look into this issue of evangelization and making the homily more attractive, because as Catholics, I think the Catholic Church is like more than 2,000 years old, and we've always been following this tradition. I'm not saying the tradition is bad, but I think that we should bring in a bit of modernization, We should bring in some modernization into the church to make it to continue following it and being attracted to it, wanting to stay in it, not changing the culture as such, but just making it modern. And just the way we had marriage ceremonies earlier on in life, you know? And
I'm absolutely fascinated by this idea that Catholics need to embrace evangelicism more than they currently do. Do they need to be more evangelical? Kira, I just wonder, is that something you want from your church? Catholicism is not thought of as being as evangelical as some other faiths. Do you want that to change?
Yes, I think we should be more in touch within the church and within our daily lives, and I think that's an important step forward. But I think Pope Francis is a good example for that. He's a man of the people, and I think we should follow in his footsteps.
All right, thank you very much indeed. We're going to go back to our guests in Argentina in a moment. First, more of your comments that are coming in. Nagos in South Africa has just called up saying he's the same age as Pope Benedict. What happens if he decides to retire too? Well, I guess we'll go through what we've been through in the last month all over again. Jeffrey in Toronto has just called up. Hi, Jeffrey. Thanks for calling. A new Pope will have a very vocal voice to challenge the lack of effort from many world leaders to help the poor, again, putting an emphasis on the church, helping the poor around the world. And there's an interesting point here from Charles watching us in Saudi Arabia. Coming back to the sex abuse scandal, he says, it's a problem for the church, but it's also a problem for society. It's something we have to address across the board. Well, thank you very much for that, Charles. And of course, any of you watching, we're live, so all of those comments you send in come straight to me. I was mentioning the World Have You Say video uploader. Let's have a look at another one that's just come in. Basil in Dominica has posted this.
I would like to see a pope that is far more spiritualized than humanized. It doesn't matter to me whether the pope is lame or blind or deaf. He could be frail or infirmed, but must be spiritual enough to hear the voice of God.
Well, thank you very much, Basil. Obviously taking a break from working as a doctor there. He had a stethoscope around his neck. Florencia in Buenos Aires, let me ask you about that. You know this man better than most of us do. Will he be able to communicate the voice of God to the billion Catholics in the world?
Well, I really have no doubt about that in the first place, because God was the one who chose him. We heard in the news speculations about who would be the next pope, but really we were surprised because it was an election of God, and that's the first thing. On the second, I would like to say that as a bishop, he has always been very near people who suffer, and very near all Catholics and other religions too. I heard that you were speaking about the church going near other religions, and really is what he did here. And we heard and we read in the news leaders from Islam, leaders from a Jewish church here, a rabbi said, a very important rabbi here in Buenos Aires said that he was really a father to him, and that is a very shocking expression from someone to really believe that even though we think different things, we come from different places, we have something that unites us, that is to worry about human beings. Every person is a human being, and the church should be near all of us.
And I think one of the interesting things, which I'm going to invite you and all of our other guests to explain to our non-Catholic viewers, is how you see the Pope, what he actually means to you as a Catholic. Because I get the impression from some people who have been getting in touch with the BBC, they've been bemused by how important this appointment has seemed to Catholics. So we'll invite our Catholic guests to try and explain that to those of you who have been looking for an explanation. More comments coming in from Uruguay, New Zealand, Mauritania. I haven't had a message from there for a while. Thank you if you're watching there. We're going to take a quick break. Then we'll be back live here on BBC World News to continue to talk about Pope Francis and the challenges he faces.
No, I absolutely talking about it. Let me say something. No, I absolutely talking about it. Let me say something.
Hi, I'm Ros Atkins. I can see that Andrew in Nairobi has just tweeted us. Hi, Andrew. Thanks for getting involved. He says, the Pope is no longer a religious leader, but a world leader. Is the Pope prepared for this? Well, to be honest, I'm not sure anyone can be quite ready for the papacy, but certainly he'll be getting used to a whole different profile. Before a couple of days ago, hardly any of us knew about him. Now the whole world knows about Pope Francis. Let's turn to three of our guests. And I'd like to ask all of you a point I was making just before the break. Some Catholics have been, non-Catholics have been contacting the BBC and saying, I don't quite understand why this means so much to people within the faith. I wonder if all three of you could quickly tell me what the Pope means to you. Kira in Rome first.
I think he is the figurehead of the Catholic Church. He is our role model. He is a person who needs to communicate with other religious leaders, and I think he has to be a strong person who we follow, who we respect. I think Pope Francis has proved that to us already. It's like the captain of your football team. You want him to be the best, the strongest, and he is our captain.
Sefu in Nairobi, what about you?
I'll start by saying at first that God is not a God of disorder. He's a God of order from creation time. So as Catholics, even when you're in a country, you have a president. The people who ask what a pope means to Catholics, you should first ask yourself, what does a president mean to a country? Because as a country, you just cannot run haphazardly. You need a leader, a central figure, someone who will say, this is the way to go. This is what to do. This is what we should look up to. So having a leader is very important for any congregation, for any denomination. Just the way countries have leaders, Christians as well should have leaders. Jesus was the leader of the Christian faith when he started it. People would follow him because he was a leader. You need to be centralized around something. And that is why, as the Catholic Church, we have a leader who is the Pope, because it is godly, because it is something that was there since creation. Israelites had a leader who was Moses, who they would follow around. If Israelites were just led to move haphazardly the way they wanted, nothing would ever get done. And that is why God always chose a leader. There was Moses, there was Joshua, there was David, there was King Saul, and in this case for Catholics, we have the Pope, and he is our leader.
Sefu, thank you very much for your explanation. I can see Father Dominic nodding his head. Sir, I'll come to you live in Delhi in a moment, but we are joined live by Guillermo. He's in BBC Mundo's Buenos Aires studio. You're a lawyer. You also volunteer for Catholic non-governmental organisations. Explain to our viewers, especially those who aren't Catholic, the role the Pope plays in your life and your faith.
Well, particularly for a Catholic, the Pope is like a father. And really what Bishop Bergoglio has a very good image in our country. He was really father not only for Catholics, but for all the people of good faith, as he usually says. And that's why I think it's an opportunity for us, the Catholics, to go outside the Catholic Church and show others how good is our faith. Our faith gives us a lot of happiness, and give us a lot of strength for working, and give us a lot of strength to have a family, and give us strength to go to those who suffer. And that's why I work usually as a lawyer, but also in the NGOs. And that's something that I think Pope Francis will show to people from other from other religions. And I think he will become not only a father of the Catholics, but a father of the whole world.
And Guillermo, I have to tell you that not many people, but a minority of people, Michelle in Long Beach in the United States, are raising concerns about the role the Catholic Church played in Argentina during military rule in the 1970s and 1980s. Do you have any concerns about the role of the Church or the role of Pope Francis?
Well, as long as I know, he did when he was bishop, and he did everything he had in his hands to help those who were suffering, or those who were kidnapped, or those who disappeared. It was 35 years ago or 40 years ago, and I know and I really believe him that he did what he could do at that time, at that moment. But in the past years, he's been always a leader for human rights issues. He always spoke about the importance of defending human rights. And so I think we really have to trust on what he says. Okay. He's a very convincing man.
And you have to emphasize every time that Pope Francis has never been found guilty of anything or proved to have done anything. And really the accusation isn't so much that he helped the military junta, it's more that he turned a blind eye. However, we've already heard from the Vatican today that there's actually evidence that he did a great deal to help those Jesuits who are coming under pressure or who had been kidnapped by the Jesuits, by the military junta. Thanks to all of our guests. Thank you to all of you who've been watching. I'll speak to you soon. Bye-bye.
Let me say something.